Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. The knife hit the cutting board when he dropped it. I was halfway through dinner prep when my life tilted. I am Mia and I was 32 that night. Behind me, my husband spoke in this weird, steady voice. "I don't love you anymore," he said, like a boring update. For a second, I honestly thought he meant the food. My brain grabbed the safest meaning because that felt easier. I laughed too loud and wiped my hands on a towel. "You mean the recipe or what?" I asked without turning around. Silence answered first, and it crawled straight up my spine. I finally looked over my shoulder and caught his face. No smile, no eye roll, just this blunt, tired stare. It was the kind of look you use at the DMV. That is when my laugh dried up in my throat. This wasn't a joke or a dramatic couple fight anymore. "What are you talking about?" came out way too sharp. My chest felt tight and my hands started to tingle. He leaned on the counter and watched me like a stranger. "I checked out a long time ago," he said, almost casual. He talked like he was explaining a bill I forgot to pay. In that moment, I clung to the word checked. Checked out sounded temporary, like something you reverse with effort. I told him he was just stressed and being overdramatic. "We are fine," I said. "We are just in a rough patch." Even as I said it, I felt how thin it sounded. He shook his head once and glanced down at his phone. That tiny move hit harder than the actual words somehow. "If you were happy, you would know I am lying," he said. He never looked away from the screen while saying that. I realized I was still holding the knife way too tight. "Is there someone else?" I asked, and my voice cracked. I swear I already knew the answer before he moved. He sucked in a breath like I had dragged something out. There was this small pause that felt 10 minutes long. Then he nodded once, like he was confirming a delivery. I remember focusing on a scrap of onion on the board. If I kept my eyes there, maybe it would undo everything. "It is not what you think," he said, which is always a lie. We just connected, and it made things really clear for me. That line still rings in my head when I write this. Connected how? I asked, because I wanted him to hear it. The word sounded stupid out loud, like some app feature. He finally looked at me like I was causing inconvenience. "I feel more like myself with her, that is the truth." He dropped her into the air like she had always existed. My first instinct was not rage, which still annoys me. I went straight to bargaining because that felt safer somehow. "We can fix this," I told him. "We can start therapy." I listed options like I was pitching a project at work. He watched me talk and his expression barely moved an inch. Now I see it so clearly when I replay that evening. He had rehearsed this, every shrug and every calm word. Back then, I thought I could still negotiate my way out. I kept asking what exactly happened and when it started. He kept drifting around the details like they were hot wires. "Are you leaving?" I asked, and my throat burned on the words. My hand finally set the knife down because it trembled. He rubbed his face like I was the one being unreasonable. "I do not want this to be ugly," he started, which meant it would be. "We could stay here as friends or something like that," he added. I stared at him, trying to decide if I had misheard. Friends sounded like a bad joke after the vows we had. "You already chose her over me, and now this," I said. He shrugged again and his phone lit up between us. That glowing screen felt more real to him than my body. Then he went for the line that finally sliced through denial. "I already found someone else," he said, "and you can do the same." He said it like he was offering me a decent coupon. My fingers slipped and the knife slammed into the board hard. That sharp crack is still the sound I hear when I think divorce. I grabbed his phone before my brain caught up. It was on the counter near his keys, screen dark and harmless. He watched my hand move and did not try to stop me. I walked straight to the bathroom and turned the lock hard. The click sounded louder than anything he said in the kitchen. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the thing. You know that point where you still hope to be paranoid? Where you would rather be the unhinged spouse than be right? That was me breathing shallow over a stupid rectangle of glass. If nothing was there, I knew this would be my shame. The passcode screen popped up and stared right back. I told myself I would try once, then give it back. My thumb typed our anniversary numbers before I could rethink. The phone opened on the first attempt and my stomach flipped. Some part of me had already expected it to work. Notifications stacked across the top like tiny landmines. Emails, a missed call, a calendar alert, nothing scary yet. Then I saw one preview from an unsaved contact with a heart. Kenyo. Utalk popped up, followed by his name and an initial. My thumb hovered over it while my pulse hammered everywhere. I tapped the message thread and his whole secret life unfolded. At the top was a contact name with one word, Dylan. The latest text from her still flashed, "You okay, how did it go?" Above that, a selfie of them pressed together in some bar. His smile in that shot looked bigger than anything I remembered. I scrolled higher, trying to keep my breathing under control. Their jokes covered the screen, short and easy, full of intimacy. Complaints about long workdays mixed with stupid flirty comments. Then my chest tightened when I saw my own name in blue. He called me distant, controlling, like some project manager from hell. Reading that hit harder than the pictures for some reason. It was not just that he lied, it was how he framed me. He told her he felt trapped at home with me hovering. He wrote that I never understood him, that she finally did. My name sat there like a problem they brainstormed together. I kept scrolling, hunting for the first spark between them. My thumb dragged back through weeks of late-night conversations. There were good morning messages, good night messages, everything between. I saw the first heart emoji, then the first straight-up "I want you." Right under that was his reply promising he was all hers. I remember staring at the date more than the words. It was not last week, not last month, longer than that. While I was busy pushing us forward, he was busy elsewhere. That timestamp sliced through every excuse he tried in the kitchen. I realized he had broken up with me long before speaking it. The phone buzzed again in my hand and I flinched. Another text appeared from her, so how did she react? 3 dots bounced under it, his reply already starting to form. I swore under my breath and watched the typing bubbles stop. He knew I had the phone, even out there in the hall. He knocked on the door, 3 quick taps, no patience. "Mia, open up," came through the wood, too calm for this. I stared at his name at the top of the screen. If I opened now, he could spin it, twist everything again. If I kept reading, I knew I could not unsee it. "Who is Dylan?" I called out, my voice sounding wrong. The hallway went quiet for a beat, like even the air waited. "She is a friend from work, nothing to worry about," floated through. I scrolled right then and found a line about wanting his hands. "Friend, sure." My jaw clenched so hard I thought a tooth would crack. I started reading bits of their thread out loud through the door. "You telling her you cannot stop thinking about last weekend, remember that? You saying you feel free with her in that hotel room?" His footsteps thudded closer, then the handle rattled hard against the lock. That was the first moment his voice actually shook all evening. "Mia, stop." His tone lost that bored distance from before. "You are twisting things, we did not cross that line yet." He tried to wedge his shoulder against the door like that helped. I stared at a message where he wrote, "I wish I was in your bed." If that is not a line, I do not know what is. Some tiny practical part of me kicked in through the shock. I opened my own email on his phone and started forwarding. Screenshots, entire pages of their chat, everything that looked important. My fingers moved fast while he kept talking on the other side. I was building my own record before he could wipe anything clean. The knocking turned into full pounding and my nerves snapped. "If you kick this door, I will call the police," I shouted. The bathroom fan hummed over his ragged breathing in the hallway. I hit send on the last batch and locked the screen. Suddenly, I was not just the wife begging anymore, I had leverage. When I finally unlatched the door, he almost fell inside. His eyes did not go to my face, they went to the phone. "Relax," I lifted it just out of his reach with a smile. "You will get it back, I already took what I need." His jaw tightened in a way I had never seen on him. We stood there inches apart, both breathing like we had run. "So this is who you meant when you told me to find someone too." He looked away at the wall, not at me, total coward move. "It is not physical," he muttered, "we just get each other, that is all." He really thought that technicality would make me feel less betrayed. I brushed past him and walked down the hall with the phone. Every step felt heavier, like gravity decided to double on me. Behind me, his footsteps followed, quicker now, losing that fake calm. "You are overreacting," came out of him like a reflex excuse. In my head, one thought finally formed clear: this is nowhere near over. I trailed his car before sunrise the next morning. No plan, no backup, just coffee in my system and rage. He drove like any normal day, same route, same signals. I remember thinking if he turned toward work I might forgive. He merged right at the last second and my hope dropped. He exited near a strip of offices and small bars. My hands pressed the steering wheel so hard my fingers hurt. He pulled into a lot and parked without even looking around. I stopped farther back and watched him step out, phone ready. He checked the screen and smiled in a way I recognized from nothing. She walked up to him near the entrance before I blinked. Black jacket, tight jeans, hair pulled up, confident steps. He opened his arms and she went straight into them. Not a quick hug, not a friendly pat and step back. They stayed locked together long enough for my heart to drop. He leaned down and kissed her cheek, then her mouth. Quick practice, like they had done it 10 times already. Her hand slid along his chest while they laughed about something. I watched from my car with the engine still running fast. In my head, a voice kept repeating, "You still believed him yesterday." I should have turned around right there, but I moved. I killed the ignition, grabbed my bag and stepped out. My legs felt numb, but they still carried me toward them. They went inside together, close enough to share one shadow. I followed behind like I was walking into a fire on purpose. Inside, they picked a corner booth without even checking around. He sat next to her, not across, bodies touching from shoulder down. She rested her hand on his thigh like it lived there. He leaned in close to talk, mouth near her ear, intimate. I stood near the entrance pretending to scroll while my pulse roared. A server asked if I wanted a table and I nodded. I picked a spot with a clear view of their booth. They never looked my way, not once, completely absorbed. He pulled out his phone and turned the screen toward her. Whatever she read made her laugh and grab his arm tighter. I know it sounds strange, but that laugh hurt more. The ease between them, the comfort, all of it. He once looked at me like that on good days. Sitting there, I realized I had been living on reruns. I stared until my eyes burned and then something in me snapped. I pushed back my chair and walked straight across the floor. At some point, my hands started shaking and I laced them together. They noticed me only when I reached the edge of their table. Her smile faded first, then his color drained a little. "Hi," I said, voice steady, crazy calm, enjoying his panic. "Mia, what are you doing here?" came out thin and strangled. He shifted forward like he might block the view somehow. Dylan glanced between us, reading the situation way too slowly. "So this is the connection you mentioned?" I asked, eyes on him. He rubbed his jaw and exhaled hard like I was the problem. I turned to her before he could spin anything. "Do you know who I am?" I asked, keeping my tone flat. Her brows pulled together and she studied my face and ring. "You are his coworker, right?" she guessed, voice losing a little confidence. I lifted my hand higher until the metal caught her full attention. "I am his wife," I told her, letting that hang in the air. The word landed between us and cracked something wide open. Her head snapped toward him so fast her hair whipped. "You told me you were separated," she threw at him sharp. He flinched, then tried to reach for her hand like damage control. "We are basically done, that is what I said," he muttered. "Papers are coming soon, we are just sorting logistics now." I laughed loud and ugly, enough for nearby tables to stare. "Yeah, the papers you have not mentioned or filed anywhere." Hearing my own voice shake made me grip the chair behind me. She pushed back slightly from him, leaving a small space. "Is that true?" she asked, eyes still locked on him. He avoided both our eyes and stared at the table surface. I watched his mouth open and close as he hunted for lies. Right then I realized he had told each of us different versions. I leaned closer until my shadow crossed both their drinks. "Have you slept with her?" I asked, because I wanted his answer out loud. He swallowed, blinked, then tried the weakest route possible. "We kissed a few times, that is all, nothing crazy." He kept his gaze on my shoulder like the truth might vanish. Dylan stared at him like she was seeing a stranger. "A few times," she repeated, like she was counting in her head. Her fingers moved away from his leg inch by inch. "You promised me you were not living there anymore," she reminded him. I filed that detail in my brain for later, one more lie. I could feel people watching us from nearby tables. Whispers started, the low kind that always follow public scenes. Normally that would embarrass me into shutting down everything. That day I almost enjoyed that he could not hide. He shifted in his seat, shoulders tight, finally losing that cool mask. "You are making a scene," he hissed, leaning forward toward me. "We can talk about this alone at home later." I shook my head because alone meant him rewriting reality again. "No, we are owing this year with her included. If you wanted privacy, you should not cheat in public." His jaw clenched hard and he finally met my eyes. "I am not happy with you anymore, I deserve more. With her I actually feel something, I feel awake around her." He used the word deserve like it was a shield against guilt. Hearing it said out loud made something cold settle in my chest. Dylan winced like his choice of words hit her too. "I do not want to be part of this mess," she muttered. She slid out of the booth, grabbed her bag and stood up. For a second I thought she might slap him or me. Instead she just stared at him like he was something on the floor. "Call me when your situation is actually done," she told him quietly. Then she turned and walked away without looking back once. He half stood like he might follow, then sat again. Watching him hesitate between us showed me exactly where I ranked. I stepped aside and let him see the door closing behind her. "Go after her," I said, my voice scraping up my throat. "That is what you want, right? No secret now." He looked at me, then at the door, torn and furious. For maybe 3 long seconds he did nothing but clench his fists. In that pause I knew whatever came next would not be kind. He finally pushed out of the booth and brushed past me. I caught the smell of his cologne and my stomach lurched hard. He hurried toward the exit, almost jogging like he could fix it. I watched him disappear into the parking lot with no intention to follow. I stayed by that empty table, hands shaking, realizing I was done pretending. I flipped open our laptop before I even took off my shoes. His jacket still hung by the door, proof he would return soon. My fingers flew over the touchpad while my heart pounded everywhere. I was done waiting for him to hand me the truth. The password screen never appeared, his account was already open. For a second I hesitated, stupid reflex about privacy and boundaries. Then I remembered his mouth on Dylan in that booth. Whatever line I crossed now was nothing compared to that. Email sat on the screen with a few unread alerts. I typed her name in the search bar and hit enter. Dozens of messages popped up, subject lines short and familiar. My stomach rolled when I saw calendar invites with both their names. I forced myself to breathe and clicked into his documents instead. A list of folders filled the screen, nothing interesting at first glance. Work bills, photos, all the usual boring categories lined up. One folder caught my eye, labeled with one word: taxes. That name felt wrong, too safe to hide anything spicy. Which made it perfect actually, because he knew I hated forms. I opened it and several files appeared, each tagged with dates. Only one was recent, updated a few days before everything exploded. I clicked and a scanned contract opened across the screen. My brain needed a second to sort the blocks of text. The title hit first, residential lease agreement in bold across the top. Halfway down the page 2 names sat next to tenant. His name and Dylan's surname stared back at me in print. My own name existed nowhere in that document, like I evaporated. Beneath the lines were signatures, shaky but clear, already locked in. The date mocked me, weeks before I even felt something was wrong. My hands went numb and I had to sit down hard. He had not just cheated, he had prepped an entire exit route. Rent amount, move-in day, everything laid out in careful numbers. He was planning a life with her while I cooked dinner upstairs. I zoomed in on one note in the margin about timing. It mentioned waiting until the lease on our place was handled. They referenced me as the spouse, not by name, just a problem. Reading that line felt worse than the picture of them kissing. I backed out and checked the email thread with the property manager. There were messages about credit reports and scheduling a tour. Dylan handled most of it while he answered from his work address. They joked about how their future home needed good water pressure. It sounds stupid, but that detail broke something loose in me. I remember thinking he never once cared about that in our place. I forwarded the entire chain to my own account with shaking hands. Then I took screenshots of the lease in case he nuked everything. The front door opened while the last file finished sending. I closed the laptop slowly and left it right in the center. His footsteps approached behind me steady, like any normal night. He stopped when he saw my posture in the laptop and the folder. "What are you doing?" His voice dropped, cautious now, not casual. I slid the computer toward him and tapped the trackpad once. The lease reopened and those two signatures filled the screen again. "So, when were you planning to invite me to your little housewarming?" He stared at the screen, then at me, eyes going hard. "This is not what it looks like," came out on reflex. I laughed, because I actually heard that line in movies. "Looks exactly like a lease with your girlfriend," I told him. He dragged a chair back and sat like his legs might buckle. "We were going to tell you after things calmed down." You catch the tone there, like I am some volatile stranger. I folded my arms so I didn't throw the laptop at him. "You signed this weeks ago," I pointed at the date near the bottom. "You were already building a life somewhere else before that confession." He rubbed his temples like I was giving him a migraine. "We have been done for a long time, Mia, you know that." There it was again, that script designed to rewrite my memory. I forced myself to stay with the facts on the screen. "You told her you were basically out already," I reminded him slowly. "You never actually moved out, you just moved your honesty to her." He pushed the chair back and started pacing across the room. "Divorce is the best option," he threw out with a heavy sigh. "We are only hurting each other staying in this situation." He talked like a therapist in a commercial, polished and detached. "Divorce, fine, I can accept that word eventually," I answered. "But where exactly did you think I would live while you played house?" He frowned at me like I had missed some obvious solution. "You can visit your mom for a while," he waved one hand. That suggestion landed like an insult dressed as generosity. "So you keep the house we built and move her into another. You walk away with two places and I crash in my childhood room." I heard my voice rising, but I did not bring it down. He went back to the lease and jabbed at the rent. "I can barely afford this plan," he muttered, "you know taxes killed us." He leaned on numbers the second his morals got shaky. For a moment he actually seemed annoyed I was not sympathetic. "You realize I contribute to this mortgage, right?" I asked quietly. "My paycheck does not vanish when it hits our joint account." His jaw worked like he wanted to argue but had nothing. "You will be fine, Mia, you always land on your feet." That line triggered something old and ugly in my chest. Because what he meant was, I will feel bad but not enough. I stepped around the table and picked up the printed copy. I held it up between us like a mirror he refused to use. "She really signed this knowing I existed in this house?" He shrugged, barely there, like that part had never mattered anyway. "We thought you would understand that we tried," he answered finally. My fingers curled around the paper so tight it crinkled loud. "Tried what exactly?" I pushed because I wanted him to say it. "Tried to be happy with you, tried to make it work." He finally spit the words out and flinched as soon as they landed. That is what he was carrying while I planned anniversaries and budgets. I set the lease down flat, smoothing the crease with my thumb. "Okay," I said, my voice calmer than I felt inside. "Then from now on we do not try feelings, we handle business." His eyes narrowed like he heard a threat underneath the measured tone. "You want lawyers?" His lip curled. "That is where you are going." I gave a small nod because the decision was already forming. I am done arguing with someone who built a backup apartment. Tomorrow I would stop begging and start protecting everything with my name on it. I booked a lawyer before his alarm even went off. My hands shook over the keyboard, but I filled in the contact form. I wrote cheating, secret lease, possible divorce, and hit submit fast. Then I stared at the confirmation screen and realized there was no going back. The firm called within an hour and squeezed me in. I grabbed my folder of screenshots and copies like armor. Driving there, I kept hearing his voice telling me I would be fine. Fine apparently meant alone while he played house with her somewhere else. The attorney walked in, shook my hand, and opened a notebook. "Tell me what is happening," she said, steady and almost bored. That calm tone grounded me more than any hug could have. I slid my phone across the desk and pulled up the messages. I watched her eyes move over the chat logs in silence. Every time a flirty line appeared, she tapped the screen once. When she reached the hotel comments, her mouth drew into a line. Then she opened the email with the lease and read slowly. "This is more than enough to show fault," she said eventually. She pulled out a legal pad and started listing possible options. "You are on the mortgage, that means you have serious leverage. You do not have to leave the house unless you choose. I actually blinked at that because I had assumed the opposite. In my head, I was already packing a bag for my childhood room. Hearing I could stay here short-circuited whatever guilt I had. For the first time in days, my breathing came easier. She asked about our accounts, income, and any savings we had. The questions came quick, like she had done this 1,000 times. I answered as best as I could while my brain scrambled. Every number I gave her felt like a rope back to shore. Then came the part that truly flipped the script for me. You need to protect yourself before confronting him again, she said. Change passwords, separate some funds, secure important documents today. Her tone left no space for hesitation or sentimental speeches. She drafted a separation proposal right there on her screen. It covered temporary support, use of the house, and a timeline. When she asked if I wanted his affair named officially, I nodded. If he wanted out so badly, he could read it in legal language. Do you want him served, or will you hand this yourself? That question hung between us like a dare and an invitation. I pictured a stranger showing up at his job with papers. Then I pictured his face when I pushed them across our table. I will give them to him, I answered, surprising both of us. She printed the draft and slid it over with a pen. My hand shook only once while I signed my name at the bottom. That signature felt like a small funeral and a small rebirth. When I got home, I went straight to our desk drawers. I pulled every file that had both our names on it. Titles, insurance, bank statements, anything that could matter later. I stacked them on the dining table and snapped photos one by one. Then I opened my own laptop and changed everything digital. Online banking passwords, cloud storage, email, even my streaming accounts. It felt petty and practical at the same exact time. Every click made me feel a little less trapped and a little more awake. The locks came next because her name on that lease haunted me. I called a locksmith and told him I needed urgent help. He showed up faster than I expected and got to work. While he switched hardware, I pretended this was just normal maintenance. In reality, my heart raced with every turn of his tools. I kept imagining Mark showing up with her and strolling inside. That fantasy made my stomach twist enough to push through the anxiety. When the locksmith finished, he handed me 2 new keys. Anyone else have keys to this place? He asked casually. Just my husband, I answered, tucking the cold metal into my pocket. I will handle that part later, I added, mostly for myself. He shrugged and left, unaware he had just closed a door on my old life. After he left, the quiet felt strange, too sharp and heavy. I went to our bedroom closet and stared at his side. Row after row of his shirts lined up like soldiers. I grabbed a stack and dropped them into an empty box. I kept moving, not letting myself think too long about anything. Shoes, belts, toiletries, all of it straight into cardboard. I left the basics he might need for a short stay. Enough for him to understand this was temporary, not a full exile yet. On top of the last box, I placed the printed proposal. I added a sticky note with 3 words you should read. My handwriting looked weirdly calm, like someone else had written it. I left the stack of boxes by the front hallway where he entered. By late afternoon, adrenaline wore off and pure exhaustion crashed in. I made coffee just to have something warm to hold. My eyes kept jumping to the new lock on the door. Every small sound outside made my shoulders tense for impact. His car pulled into the driveway right after the sun dipped. I heard the engine shut off and my pulse spiked again. Then there was the familiar rattle of his key at the door. Followed by a pause, then a harder shove that did nothing. What the hell? His voice burst through the wood, full of outrage. He tried the handle again, more forceful, like maybe it was stuck. I walked over and slid the deadbolt back with a slow click. When I opened, I blocked most of the doorway with my body. You changed the locks, disbelief and anger mixed in his eyes. He held his useless keys up between us like evidence. I tilted my head and let myself study his face. There was a new tightness around his mouth, something almost like worry. We needed better security, I answered, voice flat. Think of it as an upgrade. I stepped aside just enough for him to enter the hallway. His gaze landed on the boxes, then on the papers on top. He froze there, one foot still half turned toward the exit. What is this? His hand hovered over the documents like they burned. A very basic outline, I said, from the attorney I met today. The word attorney clearly hit him harder than the boxes did. For the first time, I watched genuine shock crack through his arrogance. You already went to a lawyer, his voice dropped, quieter and rougher. He picked up the pages and flipped through them too fast. His eyes darted over phrases about support and property and infidelity. His fingers tightened around the paper until the edges curled upward. So that is it, you just decided to nuke everything. He paced in a short line, paper flapping in his grip. You could have talked to me before dragging strangers into this. He threw that last line like I was the one who betrayed vows. I leaned against the wall and crossed my arms to stay still. I tried talking for days, you gave me silence and half stories. Strangers are starting to sound safer than your version of honesty. His jaw clenched as he stared at the line mentioning his affair. You made me into a villain on here, he jabbed at the page. You left out all the ways you pushed me there. There it was again, the skillful shift from action to blame. I felt the old guilt stir, then watched it shrink under new anger. I stepped forward and tapped the spot with his girlfriend's name. You signed a lease with another woman while sharing this house. Whatever pushed you, that part belongs to you, not me. If you are not the villain, start acting like something else. He looked up then and our eyes locked for a long moment. Behind the fury, I finally saw something new, actual fear. His future was no longer just a romantic fantasy with a fresh apartment. It now included legal bills, divided assets, and consequences in black ink. We are not filing yet, I said, choosing every word with care. This is a starting point, not the final version of our lives. How you handle things from here will decide what comes next. The papers trembled slightly in his grip, and not from my hands this time. My phone buzzed again on the coffee table. Another message from him slid over the top of the screen. You destroyed our marriage instead of working on it. I watched the preview fade while my tea went cold. Funny how the guy who cheated thinks I swung the hammer. I opened the thread and scrolled through the recent ones. You turned my mistake into a war. You took everything from me. You will regret this when you are alone. I read them twice, then hit screenshot instead of replying. Months earlier, I would have written essays back defending myself. Now I just tapped the info button and muted his contact. The silence after that click felt heavy and weirdly peaceful. Every time my thumb hovered over unmute, I pictured Dylan's name on that lease. That image is still my seatbelt when I feel tempted to answer. The final signing happened on a Tuesday morning. We sat across a polished table with our lawyers between us. He wore his best shirt like that somehow helped his case. I kept my folder open with every receipt and screenshot ready. If you ever divorce, document everything, trust me on that. The judge walked in, checked our names, and asked a few questions. Do you both agree this marriage is irretrievably broken? His lawyer nudged him and he finally forced out a yes. When it was my turn, I swallowed hard and said yes too. That single word felt like dragging a suitcase across my own chest. There was a section about the house that turned the air sharp. His attorney argued that selling would give us a fresh start. Mine slid forward a stack of payment records with my handwriting. She pointed out how much of that place came from my income. The judge glanced between us, then granted me exclusive use for now. He shot me a look across the table, quick and furious. So I lose the house and my wife in one day. The word wife landed wrong coming from his mouth after everything. I held his stare for a second, then looked at the paperwork. I was not going to cry in a room full of strangers. When we stepped into the hallway, he caught my elbow. You really want to be enemies over this, his voice low and tight. For a second my old instinct kicked up and I almost apologized. Then I remembered him telling me to go find someone else. I slid my arm free and told him we were just done. Move-out day came faster than either of us expected. His friend pulled up with a truck and 2 folding dollies. They loaded his boxes while he stomped through the rooms. Every time he grabbed something, he made sure I noticed. Each slammed drawer felt like a small tantrum he thought I deserved. At one point, he lifted our wedding photo off the shelf. He stared at it too long, jaw tight, eyes unfocused. Take it, I told him, my voice steadier than I felt. He studied me like he was waiting for a breakdown that never arrived. Then he wrapped the frame in a hoodie and shoved it into a box. Near the end, he came back inside without any more stuff. So that is it, you really prefer paperwork over fixing us. He stood in the middle of the living room, breathing hard. You did not even try to fight for me, not really. That line still annoys me more than the cheating sometimes. I stepped closer so he could not dodge my face. I fought for you while you were building another life. You just did not like that I finally fought for myself. He opened his mouth, shut it, then looked around our half-empty space. You will miss me when the house is quiet, he muttered on his way out. The door closed and the sound echoed through every room. I waited, listening for footsteps coming back, but nothing followed. I kept still, ending there until the truck engine faded down the street. That was the moment it really hit me that he was gone. Not cheating gone or emotionally gone, just physically out of this place. 2 weeks later, Dylan's name flashed across my phone unexpectedly. I almost rejected the call on reflex, then swiped accept. Her voice came through thin and shaken, not smug like before. He told me you dragged him through court for no reason. I let out a short laugh that did not sound friendly at all. I told her about the lease dates and the emails. I mentioned the hotel texts without reading them word for word. There was a pause on her end, then a soft curse. He swore you two were already separated when we started. I could hear real frustration in her tone, not fake guilt. Look, I said, I am not your therapist or your enemy. You were part of it, but he built the whole structure. If he lies to one woman, he will lie to the next. You deserve to know the timeline you actually stepped into. She whispered thanks and hung up before either of us softened. After that call, something in me finally loosened a little. I stopped imagining them in some perfect apartment together. Instead, I pictured two people juggling the same man's stories. It did not make anything okay, but it took away the pedestal. I realized I had spent months competing with a fantasy, not a person. Slowly, I started reclaiming stupid small parts of the house. I moved his leftover junk into the garage without asking. I dragged his old dresser out of the bedroom and into storage. I bought a cheap shelf with my own card and built it crooked. Every new screw felt like proof I could handle more than I thought. One night I changed his contact name in my phone. Husband became his first name, then just an initial. Then I scrolled down and set the text tone to silent. It felt like erasing a title I had clung to for too long. I left his number in there, but it stopped feeling like home. So when his messages came that night, accusing and desperate, I watched. You ruined everything. You could have forgiven me, and we would be happy. You like playing the victim for strangers, enjoy it. The last one is what pushed me toward the App Store. I downloaded Reddit and made a throwaway account in seconds. Hands a little unsteady, but not the same panic as before. I clicked on a relationship forum and hit create post. For the title, I typed the words he threw at me first. My husband does not love me anymore and already found someone else. In the text box, I started laying out the story. The confession in the kitchen, the bathroom messages, the lease. The scene at the bar, the lawyer, the new locks. I left out a few details because some pain stays private. But most of it poured out like it had been waiting. So that is where I am now, on my own couch. House still half full of memories, half full of cardboard and possibility. My phone sits next to me, his thread muted, Reddit draft open. He thinks I ruined his life by refusing to swallow betrayal quietly. So tell me, strangers, did I finally choose myself too late or just in time?